They say family is everything. But sometimes, family gatherings feel more like interrogation rooms. That day, the air at our so-called casual family meeting was as tight as a sealed jar. Judging eyes, smug smiles, and backhanded compliments as they all gathered around the long oak dining table like vultures circling their prey. That prey was me. I'm Vanessa Parker, 32 years old, born and raised in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm a proud single woman, a graphic designer by trade, and, apparently, in the eyes of my extended family, the underachiever of the clan. But what they didn't know that day was that I had a secret that would flip their smug little assumptions right on their heads, and it all started with one sentence, 6 words, that sliced through my dignity like a knife through butter. You always were the poor one. My cousin Janine said it with that trademark laugh, the one that sounds like a hyena with a designer handbag. She didn't even blink. My aunt sipped her wine and smirked. My uncle chuckled like it was some long-standing family joke. I smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile that said, I'm okay with this. It was the kind that says, I'm about to ruin your entire day. You see, I've never been flashy. I drive a modest Corolla, wear clothes I thrift or design myself, and prefer quiet evenings designing logos over bottle service and brunches. That apparently translated to a broke in my family's shallow economy of Gucci belts and leased Benzes. But what they failed to realize is that while they were flaunting status, I was building something invisible, something real, something called equity. But before I get to that glorious moment of poetic justice, let me rewind just a little. So you understand why this moment meant everything to me. I grew up in a family that worshipped 2 things, appearances and comparison. If you weren't someone's better, you were irrelevant. My older cousins had followed the prescribed plan, top universities, MBA degrees, high-paying corporate jobs. Me? I chose to go to a state college, paid my own way, and majored in, wait for it, to design art. My father had said. You mean like drawing pictures? Yeah, Dad. Like drawing pictures. And solving brand problems. And making 6 figures from home by the time I was 30, but they never really asked about that. No one ever asked how I was doing. They just looked at the absence of a ring on my finger, or the fact that I wasn't tagged in luxury vacations, and assumed I was failing. Which is why I stopped trying to explain myself. But that day, something in me snapped. That it was a sunny Saturday in June. My Aunt Beverly had invited the whole family to her lake house under the pretense of a fun catch-up. But the moment I arrived, I knew what it really was, a bragging buffet. Everyone brought something to show off. My cousin Marcus brought his fiancée, a pageant queen from Atlanta. Janine brought her brand new Tesla and strategically placed her Louis Vuitton purse right in the center of the living room, like a shrine. Even Aunt Bev herself wore a diamond-studded Rolex she couldn't stop referencing. And me? I brought homemade banana bread and a sealed manila envelope tucked in my tote bag. I didn't intend to show it. Not unless they pushed me. A spoiler. They pushed me. The family meeting part began after lunch. Aunt Bev tapped her glass dramatically. Okay, everybody, she chirped, let's go around and share life updates. Asterisk. My stomach turned. I knew this script. Marcus went first. Promotion. Wedding. Condo. Check, check, check. Janine went next. She just launched a skincare line. It's still in beta, she said, but we've already grossed $30K this quarter. Applause erupted. Even my cousin Damon, who barely graduated high school, chimed in that he was investing in crypto. Then, it was my turn. I cleared my throat. I'm good, I said simply. Work's steady. Life is peaceful. Silence. Then came the comment, you always were the poor one. Everyone laughed. Everyone except my grandmother, who looked at me with the same sympathy she's had since I chose the creative path. I could have let it slide. I'd let it slide for years. But something in me shifted. I reached into my tote bag. Actually, I said, sliding the envelope across the table like I was playing poker in Vegas, I brought something too. They stared. I could feel the room's temperature drop. Aunt Beverly looked amused. What is it? A coupon, she sneered. Nope, I said, slowly opening the envelope and pulling out the stapled, notarized document. It's a real estate contract, I said, meeting Janine's eyes. I closed on a fourplex in Plaza Midwood last week. Silence. I let it hang there. I put down 25%, renovated 2 of the units myself, and already have 3 tenants lined up. The rent will cover my mortgage. In 5 years, it'll be free and clear. That's passive income. And I still work full-time. Oh, and I paid for all of it myself. No cosigner. No loans from family. You could hear someone's wine glass tremble. The truth is, I'd been saving for that property for 6 years and no dinners out. No unnecessary shopping. I freelanced weekends. I took ugly gigs just to build my capital. I learned the housing market like it was a religion. I watched home prices rise while everyone else scrolled through vacation deals. When interest rates dipped, I made my move. The fourplex was ugly. It smelled like cigarettes and despair. But I saw the bones. I saw what it could be. I spent 2 months and every spare evening repainting, tiling, fixing what I could myself, and hiring contractors for what I couldn't. Now, it was worth nearly $200K more than I paid. And climbing, but more than the money, it gave me power, freedom, security, none of which my designer-clad cousins had. Janine blinked at the contract. Wait, you own a building? I nodded. 4 rental units. All mine. Marcus leaned over. How'd you even afford that? I smiled. By being the poor one, remember? Aunt Beverly shifted in her chair. Well, anyone can buy property if they save long enough. That's not exactly impressive. Actually, I said calmly, less than 25% of black women in this country own real estate, and fewer own investment property. So yes, I'd say it's impressive. My grandmother clapped quietly. I saw pride in her eyes I'd never seen before, and just like that, the room was different. After the meeting, people approached me one by one. Damon asked how to start investing the legit way. Janine asked for my contractor's number. Even Aunt Beverly, with her lake house and her smug smile, asked if I thought she could Airbnb her guest suite. I answered them all, because here's the thing, I wasn't trying to win a family feud. I was trying to build a legacy. For years, they measured success in labels and followers. I measured it in square footage and cash flow. Now, they were listening, but here's the twist, I wasn't done. I pulled out a second envelope. What's that? Marcus asked. This, I said, is my next deal. A duplex in East Charlotte. I'm closing in 2 months. This time I'm partnering with a nonprofit to provide affordable housing. I'll get tax breaks, and the community gets stable rent. They were stunned. That's noble, Aunt Beverly muttered. It's smart, I said. But it's also necessary. We can't keep complaining about gentrification if we're not owning anything. That's when my father, silent the entire time, stood up and walked over. He put his hand on my shoulder. I'm proud of you, Ness. It took everything in me not to cry. Since that day, family gatherings feel different. I still get teased, but now it's affectionate. Janine asks me about duplexes more than she posts about skincare. Marcus asked if I could help him find his first property. Aunt Beverly? She's still herself, but even she introduces me now as our little mogul. Asterisk, I'm not mad at them. They only knew what they saw. And what they saw wasn't flashy, but it was real, and now, it's respected. To anyone out there being underestimated because you don't look rich, don't let it rattle you. You don't owe anyone an explanation for living below your means. While they were posting brunches, I was posting rent checks. While they were laughing, I was learning, and now they're listening, and I'm just getting started, because sometimes, being called poor is the beginning of your richest story yet. But here's what they never understood, richness isn't just about numbers in a bank account or keys to a fancy car. It's about freedom. About being able to walk away from a toxic job, take a break when you need it, or help someone without checking your own wallet first. And let me tell you a secret I've never said out loud. I almost didn't make it. 2 years before I bought that fourplex, I was $9,000 in debt. Not from credit cards or luxury splurges, just life. Medical bills, a car breakdown, freelance clients ghosting on payments. I remember sitting in my studio apartment one night with a broken heater and cold pasta, wondering how I'd climb out. That's when I made a rule for myself: learn what schools don't teach, build what no one can take. So I studied obsessively, podcasts on real estate investing, YouTube channels by Black women house hackers. I read contracts for fun and joined Facebook groups where I asked dumb questions. I found a mentor, Cynthia, a black woman landlord in her 50s who told it to me straight: don't wait for a man, baby. Buy your own bricks. That line changed my life. It wasn't easy. I faced rejection after rejection. I had agents who didn't take me seriously, lenders who looked at my single status like it was a liability, and one seller who flat out asked if my husband would be joining us. When I said no, he laughed. I didn't. Instead, I kept going, and when I finally closed on that fourplex, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I stood alone in the hallway of a half-gutted unit, ran my fingers along the cracked wall, and whispered, "We made it." Not I. We. Me and the girl eating cold pasta in that drafty apartment. Me and every woman who's been called too quiet, too artsy, or too broke to be taken seriously. That was for us. After the family meeting, things began to shift in unexpected ways. A few weeks later, Janine invited me to coffee. Not her usual performative espresso spot, but a quiet cafe near my neighborhood. "I want to learn," she said, eyes softer than I'd ever seen them. "I make money, but I spend it just as fast. You've got something solid. We started meeting every 2 weeks. I helped her pull her credit report, taught her about debt-to-income ratios. She cried once, when she realized how much she'd been leasing for likes. But I told her the truth, awareness is wealth too. Marcus brought his fiancée to a seminar I hosted at a local co-working space. I had no fancy title, no finance degree, just my story and proof that it worked. Damon started small, $100 into a high-yield savings account. Then he called me at midnight, breathless. I just paid off my first credit card. Sis, I feel unstoppable. It was happening. One seat at a time. Then, the most unexpected call of all came. My father. We'd always had love, but it was awkward, especially after I took the path he didn't understand. But that Sunday afternoon, his voice cracked through the phone line. I've got some money saved, he said. Not a lot, but I want to do something with it before I retire. Can you teach me? I almost dropped my phone. That moment meant more to me than any contract. Because when the people who once doubted you come back, not to gloat, but to grow, that's generational change. But that's the kind of wealth that matters most. Let me be honest about something, though, owning property isn't a fairy tale. Tenants don't always pay on time. Pipes burst. Taxes go up. I once had to chase a raccoon out of the attic. I'm still learning every single day, but I wake up knowing I'm building something that can't be wiped out with a layoff. Something that won't depreciate like a handbag. Something that, one day, I can hand off to a niece or nephew who needs a leg up. That banana bread I brought to the meeting. My grandma called the next day and asked for the recipe. I said, I knew you were special, baby. You just didn't come with fireworks. No, Grandma. I came with foundation. The second property, the duplex in East Charlotte, closed 6 months after that meeting. This time, I walked in with confidence. I'd already proven I could do it. I partnered with a nonprofit that provides support to single mothers transitioning out of shelters. 2 of my units are now homes to women who remind me of myself. Women who just need a start. I set the rent below market, but the city gave me grants and a tax break. People called it generous. I call it strategy. Kindness and smart money are not mutually exclusive. But that's when the local news station reached out. They wanted to feature my story in a piece about women in real estate. I almost said no, because the spotlight still feels unnatural. But then I remembered all those quiet women scrolling Instagram, thinking they're behind because they don't look wealthy. I said yes, for them. The day the segment aired, my inbox exploded. Messages from other women who were tired of pretending to have it together. Messages from college grads drowning in debt. From mothers starting over. From artists. From entrepreneurs. From dreamers, all of them asking the same thing. How did you start? So I wrote it all down. Every step. Every mistake. Every win. I turned it into a free PDF and posted it on my site. No email gate. No catch, because sometimes people don't need a guru. They just need a mirror, proof that someone who looks like them did it. And now, as I sit here writing this, I'm finalizing paperwork for property number 3, a small, rundown triplex near the new light rail extension. It doesn't look like much, but neither did I, right? It's poetic. Really, I was once the poor one. Now, I'm the one showing others how to build brick by brick. Quietly. Strategically. Powerfully. So the next time someone laughs at your thrift store shoes or your no-frills lifestyle, let them laugh. Let them think you're the underdog. Let them think you're losing. And then, when the time is right, slide that real estate contract across the table, not to prove them wrong, but to show them what real wealth actually looks like. Because you don't need permission to be powerful. You just need a plan, and maybe a little banana bread. A few months after closing on my 3rd property, I started getting invitations to speak, panels, meetups, even a community college class called Money Moves for Millennials. At first, I laughed. Me? A speaker? I was the girl who used to freeze when someone asked what I actually did for work, but something shifted. I remembered how lost I felt 5 years ago, scrolling through social media and seeing nothing but unattainable wealth, vague advice, and hustle culture with no blueprint. No one ever showed the how. And certainly no one who looked like me, with natural hair and secondhand heels, was being handed the mic. So I said yes. I stood in front of a class of 19-year-olds at that community college and told them the truth. I wasn't born rich. I didn't get lucky. I made small choices over and over again until they built something bigger than I could imagine. I stayed home while others traveled. I drove a car I'd already paid off. I said no to things that felt good so I could say yes to things that would last. A girl in the front row raised her hand. She had a tired face and ink stains on her fingers. Didn't it get lonely? That question stopped me cold. Yes, it did. There were years when my phone barely buzzed on weekends. Years where I declined weddings and skipped girls' trips. I once ate instant ramen on New Year's Eve while friends clinked champagne glasses downtown. And I questioned myself more times than I can count, but then I told her what I finally understood: loneliness that builds you is better than company that keeps you stuck. She wrote it down like it was scriptured. By the end of that semester, 5 students had opened their first high-yield savings accounts. One of them, Jamal, emailed me a photo of his first lease. He bought a tiny mobile home with a fixer-upper loan and was renting it to a classmate. That's when I knew this was bigger than me. That fall, I created something I called the Bricks Collective, a free monthly meetup for women of color who wanted to invest, budget, or just learn what a title search is. I didn't charge a cent. We met at parks, libraries, coffee shops. I brought cookies and printouts. Sometimes it was 5 women, sometimes 20. We shared stories, cheered each other on, pooled money to help one member escape a predatory lease. And every single time, someone would whisper, "I didn't know people like us could do this. But we can." We are. Then came the surprise that brought everything full circle. Aunt Beverly called me out of the blue. "I have something I want to talk to you about," she said. I braced myself. When we met for lunch, she looked different. Not polished and perfect like usual. Just tired. She pulled out a stack of bills and a foreclosure notice. "I messed up," she said quietly. "I refinanced the lake house twice trying to keep up appearances. Now I'm drowning. They might take it." That house had been her trophy, her altar of superiority. Now it was crumbling under the weight of pride. I didn't know who else to ask, she added. I looked at her for a long moment, and then I said, "I'll help you, on one condition." We didn't flip the house. We turned it into a retreat space for single mothers and women re-entering the workforce. We called it the house that healed us. We hosted financial literacy weekends, resume workshops, and mental health circles. The women who walked through its doors weren't liabilities, they were future CEOs, authors, and homeowners. Beverly donated half the property to the nonprofit I worked with before. And for the first time, I saw her cry, but not out of shame, out of relief. One night, after everyone left a workshop, I stood in that house alone and looked around. The same walls that once held passive-aggressive wine nights were now echoing with hope and laughter, and I realized, wealth doesn't just build homes. It builds healing. Now, at 34, I own 5 properties. I no longer feel the need to explain what I do or justify my choices. When people ask, "How do you do it?" I say, one quiet choice at a time. That I teach, I invest, I mentor, and sometimes, I still thrift for clothes, because I like the hunt, but I no longer feel less than. And that moment at the family meeting, the one where they called me poor, feels like a badge now. A timestamp. Proof of where I began. At SO, to the women who feel overlooked, to the creatives who've been called unrealistic, to the broke girls eating cold pasta, making vision boards in the dark, keep building. Let them laugh, let them doubt you, let them say you're not enough, and then, one day, walk into that room, lay down your bricks, and build a house so big, they can't help but step inside and listen, because you were never poor. You were planting, and now? It's harvest season. I used to think success would feel like fireworks, loud, blinding, celebratory, but the truth? It feels like peace, like waking up without dread, like choosing how to spend my time instead of begging for scraps of it, like watching my phone ring and knowing, finally, that no one's calling with bad news I can't afford to fix. It feels like sitting on the porch of my first fourplex, sipping coffee at sunrise while the world still sleeps, and knowing I own this view. But peace isn't where the story ends, it's where the legacy begins. The Bricks Collective grew faster than I expected. What started with monthly meetups turned into a digital platform. Women from Detroit, Atlanta, Oakland, and even Trinidad joined. We created courses, grant lists, property analyzers. One woman from Houston bought her first duplex using nothing but the resources we'd posted, and then, they started mentoring others. That's when I knew, this isn't just financial. This is cultural. We are undoing centuries of erasure, of silence, of surviving instead of building. We're reclaiming the right to rest, to grow, to own what we stand on. And then, something unexpected happened. I was invited to speak at a national real estate conference, not as a case study, but as a keynote. I stood on that stage in a mustard yellow jumpsuit, because I'd always hated boring corporate gray, and looked out at an audience of polished suits and skeptical stares, and I told the truth, that my first investment didn't come from a 6-figure job or a trust fund. It came from deciding that being underestimated was my greatest leverage, because no one sees you coming when they assume you're losing. They stood and clapped, but more importantly, they asked to learn. Months later, a publishing house reached out. They'd seen my TEDx talk and wanted to turn my story into a book. I laughed at first. Me? An author, but something told me to say yes, for the girl who still walks into libraries to dream, For the mother too tired to attend a workshop but who can read a chapter at midnight while her kids sleep. So I wrote it, not just my journey, but the system, the steps, the inner work, the mindset shifts, build what they can't evict. A Quiet Woman's Guide to Real Wealth. It debuted as a bestseller in the finance category. Not because I had a big PR budget, but because women shared it with other women, the same way we've always passed down recipes, remedies, and roadmaps to my family. They're different now too, not perfect, but evolving. At our most recent family gathering, the first one I hosted in my own home, Aunt Beverly brought homemade peach cobbler, and Marcus cracked jokes while cleaning up the dishes. No one called me poor. In fact, Marcus asked me to help set up a custodial account for his daughter, and when Janine walked in, she tossed her purse on the counter, held up a sleek folder, and grinned. I just closed on a condo. That was the loudest moment of the night, and all I said was, "I'm proud of you." We ended the evening with music and laughter. Someone passed around old photo albums, and when my grandma leaned over to me, she squeezed my hand and said, "Something I'll never forget, you changed the whole rhythm of this family, baby." Without yelling, without showing off, you just moved different. I smiled, tears prickling the edges of my eyes, because that's all I ever wanted it to. Move different. And make room for others to move with me. Today, I'm working on two things. First, a community land trust. We're buying up neglected lots and turning them into affordable, eco-friendly homes. One block at a time. One family at a time. Second, I'm fostering my first child. She's 10. Brilliant. Quiet like I was. Always drawing, always watching. When I asked her what she wanted most in the world, she whispered, "A room that's mine." So I gave her the attic studio. We painted the walls turquoise and put glow stars on the ceiling. I told her, "This space is yours now. And when you're ready, I'll teach you how to own more." She asked me what I meant by that, and I said, "Land, sweetheart. And your story." So if you're reading this, if you've ever been the one called broke, basic, or behind, hear me now. You are not too late, you are not too small, you are not invisible. The world may have skipped over you, but you, my sister, you're a seed, and no matter how buried you feel, you are not broken, you are planted. Now water yourself with wisdom, light yourself with vision, and protect your peace like it's gold, because one day, you'll bloom so wide, they won't remember what shade looked like, and when you show them the contract, or the keys, or the company you built, don't gloat. Smile, because they needed to doubt you, so you could remember your own power. And once a quiet woman remembers her power, brick by brick, I thought the biggest thing I'd ever do was own real estate. But I was wrong. The biggest thing I'd do, the thing that gives me goosebumps when I say it aloud, was shift the trajectory of everything that came after me. My foster daughter, Ava, was the beginning of that revelation. Not long after she moved in, I started noticing things. The way she counted dollar bills twice when buying ice cream. The way she hoarded pencils, notebooks, even rubber bands like they were treasure. I asked her one night why she kept doing it. She looked up at me and said, "Because I know what it feels like to have nothing. And I never want to feel that way again." That hit me so hard I couldn't speak, because I knew that feeling too well. That night, I stayed up and started sketching something bigger than anything I'd tried before. I called it, The Inheritance Project. It wasn't just about money, though that was part of it. It was about teaching ownership of self, story, space, and future. Imagine, financial education written for 12-year-olds. Legal literacy explained with cartoons. Real estate mentorships starting in high school. Therapy stipends for girls aging out of foster care. Scholarships for trades, not just college. I wanted to create an ecosystem that would hold young people before the world told them who they weren't. The plan scared me, which is how I knew it was worth doing. I reached out to every contact I had. My old mentor Cynthia. A woman I met at the housing authority. A group of Black therapists who were already doing free workshops in barbershops. We pulled together a small, fierce team. Called in favors. Applied for grants. Hosted bake sales and GoFundMes. Used my rental income to seed it. We started with 10 kids. By the end of the year, we had 80. Ava became our first youth ambassador. She gave a talk at a conference called What We Really Inherit, and brought the room to tears. Afterward, she whispered to me, "Miss Vanessa, I don't feel poor anymore." That's when I realized, the real estate? That was just the vehicle, but this was the movement. My story made it to national news eventually. NPR, Essence, even a segment on Good Morning America. And while the recognition was nice, what moved me most were the letters, from women in halfway houses, from teens in group homes, from single dads, high school dropouts, retired teachers. All of them saying, "I thought I was too late. I thought it wasn't for people like me. I finally believe I can build something." The phrase they used the most, "You made it feel possible." That still undoes me, because all I ever wanted was that someone would see the girl I used to be and tell her, you don't have to perform to be powerful. You don't have to shout to matter. You just have to keep showing up. That's what I became for others, and it changed everything now. I wake up in a home I built, surrounded by framed drawings from Ava, letters from women I've mentored, and blueprints for a community housing initiative we're launching next spring. The project is called The Quiet Rebellion. We're flipping the narrative of turning overlooked lots into opportunity zones, transforming silence into strategy, turning invisibility into influence. It's a rebellion, not loud and fiery, but consistent and strategic. The kind that builds generational power without asking for permission, the kind that starts at the dinner table and ends with keys. One of my favorite memories, maybe ever, happened just last month. Ava and I were sitting on the porch, watching the sun set after a long community garden day. She turned to me and asked, Miss V, what does rich really mean to you now? I smiled, not the press smile, not the polite smile, but the deep one, the one that comes from knowing your life has become the thing you once only dreamed about. I told her, rich is having options. Rich is being able to rest. Rich is helping someone and not needing anything back. Rich is quiet confidence. She thought about it for a moment, then she nodded and said, I think I'm rich now too. And that was worth more than every property I'll ever buy, because here's the truth, I want every person reading this to carry a wealth is not just what you keep, it's what you set free. So yes, they once called me poor, but now they call me landlord, author, mentor, mom, builder, CEO, reformer, healer, investor, and my favorite title of all, liberator, because this quiet woman, she didn't just survive, she didn't just buy property, she built a legacy, and now she's helping others build theirs, brick by brick. Name by name, generation by generation, and it all started with a meeting where they called me poor, but I brought the contract, and I brought the blueprint, and now we're rebuilding the world. Quietly, powerfully, permanently. The first time I met with city officials, I didn't dress for power, I dressed for purpose. No shoulder pads, no stiff heels, just a soft brown blazer, the same notebook I used to sketch my first duplex deal, and a quiet fire in my chest that said, I'm not asking for permission. I'm here to shift the room. They had invited me after The Quiet Rebellion went viral, a short video clip of Ava standing in front of one of our community gardens, explaining how the lot used to be a dumping ground but now grows herbs for local elders. It reached over 3 million views in 2 days. Suddenly, city councils and foundations and community developers were calling. Everyone wanted to partner, but I wasn't interested in handshakes without strategy. So I showed them what we'd done with less than $100,000, reclaimed 5 abandoned homes and made them equity-sharing properties for single-parent families, turned a condemned strip mall into a marketplace for Black and Latino-owned micro-businesses, mentored 500-plus teens in financial literacy, entrepreneurship, and housing rights, and then I said, calmly, now imagine what we could do with real support. There was silence, then one city commissioner leaned forward and said, what do you want? That question held power, because for so long, I didn't know how to answer it. I'd been trained, like so many of us, to be grateful just for space at the table. But now I was ready to ask for the table and the deed. So I told them, I want zoning reform. I want funding pipelines that don't require 10 years of receipts to help neighborhoods before they're gentrified out. I want youth equity ownership in their own blocks. I want culturally relevant financial curriculum in schools. And I want community land trusts protected like public parks, permanent, safe, and untouchable by corporate interests. Another pause, then, let's draft something. That moment became the catalyst for what's now called the Vanessa Model. It's a national pilot program for community-rooted wealth creation, designed by people who've lived the lack, not just studied it. We're now in talks with 4 cities. I won't lie, the meetings are long. The opposition is loud. There are days I leave feeling like I've been fighting ghosts in boardrooms. But I keep a photo of my grandmother in my phone case. She raised 5 kids on a janitor's salary. She never owned a home. But she believed in land, in harvest, in planting things that took time. When I speak in those meetings, I imagine her behind me, silent, steady, strong. She didn't live to see me close my first deal. But she's in every signature I signed. Last winter, I returned to my childhood neighborhood. I walked the same cracked sidewalks I once marched down with headphones in, imagining a future that felt impossible. But now, there's a mural of Ava painted on the side of an old church-turned-community center. Kids are playing where there used to be needles. One of my ments just got approved to open her own daycare in the same building where I used to buy dollar chips. A local news reporter approached me for a quote. She asked, what's your biggest success so far? I looked around, then I said that I didn't just invest in property. I invested in people. Sometimes I think about that family meeting again, how small I felt, how sharp those words were, "You're poor." But now I understand something deeper. They weren't trying to hurt me, they were projecting their own fear of change, fear of irrelevance, fear of a woman who didn't need applause to build empires. Asterisk, they couldn't see the contract because they couldn't yet imagine the future I was building. But now, they see it everywhere. They see it in Ava, who just got accepted into a dual program for architecture and social design. They see it in my cousins, who now host their own Bricks Collective chapters in 3 different cities. They see it in our family meetings, now quarterly, hosted in homes we own, where we no longer measure each other by bank accounts, but by impact. And just last week, Uncle Marcus raised a glass at our family reunion and said it to the one they called poor, who made all of us richer. So here's the final truth I'll leave you with: that they may laugh at your vision, they may underestimate your beginnings, they may call you poor, crazy, naive, or soft, but keep building, keep learning, keep planting seeds in soil they told you was barren, because one day, you will return to that same room with keys, with contracts, with a legacy that speaks louder than any insult ever did, and you won't need to say, "I told you so." You'll just unlock the door and invite them in, brick by brick, generation by generation, quietly, boldly, unapologetically. This is how we win. And it's strange how time softens even the hardest edges. 10 years ago, I was Googling, "What is equity?" on a library computer and wondering if anyone like me could ever afford a home. Now I sit on the board of a National Housing Innovation Council. My name's been featured in Forbes, but you won't find me talking about millionaire morning routines. What I care about now is deeper than the numbers. I care about who wins with me, because if I'm the only one in the room who made it, then we're still losing. In the last few years, the quiet rebellion has grown into something I never could have predicted. That we now operate in 6 cities. Each location has a real estate learning lab, a trauma-informed financial counseling center, youth builders incubator, and a women's co-op that reinvests 30% of profits back into the community. But what I'm proudest of? Our newest branch in Louisiana is being fully led by women I once mentored. That they're running deals, drafting policy, and doing land remediation to restore soil in low-income Black neighborhoods. One of them, Jamira, used to be homeless. Now she's teaching a class called Blueprints and Boundaries to other young mothers, and every time I hear her speak, I think this is what real wealth looks like. People ask me now if I ever want to retire. But to me, that word doesn't mean stop working. It means start living in alignment. So yes, I've stepped back from the day-to-day. I've built a team, trained leaders, and created systems that outlive my own hands. Now I spend my mornings walking in my garden, where I've planted sage, mint, and bright orange marigolds like my grandmother used to love. I write, I mentor, I read poetry to Ava, who's now in her first year of college and already designing a green affordable housing complex for her senior thesis. And I remind myself, often this wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving me right. Not long ago, I was invited to give a commencement address at a university. It was a small liberal arts school that had recently created a degree in community wealth building, a program partially inspired by the Vanessa model. Standing on that stage, I saw hundreds of young faces, some beaming with hope, some scared stiff, some already burned out from trying to be successful. Asterisk, I tossed out my written speech, and I told them this: you will be told your power comes from credentials, from followers, from the car you drive, but real power is the quiet kind, the kind that stays when no one is clapping, the kind you build when no one's watching, the kind that multiplies when you teach it. Choose that power. The standing ovation wasn't the highlight came in the form of a folded note, left on the podium. I almost dropped out. I thought I'd never belong in these rooms, but now I know. I can build the rooms. This is the ripple effect. 1 woman, 1 risk, 1 contract, and now thousands are unlocking their own doors. I didn't know when I signed that first real estate deal that I was actually signing the blueprint to my becoming. Back then, I was still shaking, still wondering if I deserved to be there. Now I know. I didn't need anyone else's permission, just my own vision and the courage to act on it. Sometimes, I go back and read that first journal entry I wrote after that family meeting, the one that started it all. It says, they laughed when I said I'd own land, they rolled their eyes when I said I'd be free, but something inside me believes, and I won't betray her anymore. I didn't betray her, I built for her, and now I build for you, too. So if you've made it this far, if you're still reading this story, wondering if you can turn your pain into power, wondering if it's too late to begin, let me be the voice that whispers what you may have never heard loud enough. You are not the sum of your struggle, you are the architect of your freedom. Asterisk, and when they call you poor, smile gently, walk forward, open the folder, lay the contract on the table, and say, that's cute, now let me show you the deed. There's something sacred about returning to a place that once broke you, and realizing it no longer holds power over your spirit. that happened for me last fall, when I was invited to speak at the women's shelter I once stayed in, years ago, when I was 23, unemployed, and ashamed to admit I needed help walking through that building again. I felt two versions of me overlapping like a double exposure. One broken, one blooming. I stood in front of 17 women, some cradling babies, others staring out the window like they weren't sure they belonged in this room, this world. I told them the truth. I used to sit where you're sitting. I used to think struggle was my only story. And I watched tears rise in their eyes, not because I was some savior, but because I was proof that the pain didn't have to be permanent. After that talk, one woman came up to me. Her name was Deanna. She said, "Miss Vanessa, I don't need a handout. I need a blueprint." I handed her my card. 2 months later, she showed up to a Quiet Rebellion orientation with a folder full of sketches for a mobile salon for women transitioning out of the justice system. Today, she runs that salon out of a refurbished trailer, with childcare built in. It serves 100 plus women a month. She calls it the crown bust. That's the kind of revolution we're growing now, not just survival, but sovereignty. Every year, I host a summit called the Groundbreakers Gathering. It's not flashy. No celebrities, no step and repeat banners, just 300 women and girls from across the country who have turned pain into property, survival into systems, chaos into curriculum. That we cry, that we dance, that we laugh until our stomachs ache, and then we sit in circles and pass the mic, and I ask one question: what have you built this year that you were once told you couldn't? The answers always leave me breathless. I built a home for my autistic son and 4 other special needs kids. I bought back the corner store my granddad lost in 1972. I opened the first bilingual doula clinic in my county. Asterisk. I bought the house I was born in and turned it into a shelter for girls like me. These aren't just stories, they're proof of concept. Sometimes people still ask me, "Vanessa, don't you get tired?" And I do. There are days when the system feels too heavy, when funding falls through, when we lose a building to bureaucracy, when girls I've mentored backslide into survival mode and stop answering my calls. But then Ava sends me a video of a little girl in a pink hard hat walking through her internship site saying, "I'm gonna be an architect just like Miss Ava." Or I see a headline about one of our Quiet Rebellion leaders being elected to city council. Or I get a voicemail from a grandmother saying, "You helped my granddaughter stay out of the streets." And I remember, this work is sacred. It's not always visible. It's not always loud, but it's always working. Last spring, I sat down with a publishing house that wanted to turn my life story into a memoir. I hesitated at first, not because I was afraid of being known, but because I wanted to make sure the message wasn't lost in the marketing. They agreed. This wasn't about glamorizing success. This was about giving people the keys to SO. We called the book, Deeds and Daughters, The Quiet Path to Power. It's part memoir, part workbook, part love letter to the women who never got their flowers. When it launched, it hit #1 in 3 categories within 48 hours. But the part that meant the most? We donated the first 5,000 copies to shelters, youth centers, prisons, and rural libraries, because who needs the blueprint most? The ones who've been told they'll never build. And now, here we are, not at the end of the story, but at a beautiful inflection point. I've started training the next generation of Quiet Rebellion directors, 22 women, all under 30, all from the neighborhoods they now serve. I no longer run the day-to-day. Instead, I focus on something even more important to healing, because if I want this movement to last, it can't run on burnout. It has to run on joy, ritual, community, and rest. So I teach my team how to pace themselves, how to grieve, how to protect their peace while still pushing systems, how to hold both ambition and softness, because wealth without wellness, that's just another version of survival. Last week, Ava came home from her internship and curled up on the couch beside me. We watched old home videos on my laptop, grainy footage from our first Quiet Rebellion site. Kids with paint rollers, too big for their hands. Me in overalls with paint in my hair. Her, smiling, holding a blueprint upside down. She leaned over and whispered, "Did you ever think it would become this big?" I laughed. "No. I just thought, maybe I could make enough to not feel afraid anymore." She nodded slowly, then she said something I'll never forget. "You didn't just stop being afraid, you made sure we didn't have to be afraid either." And just like that, I cried, not because I was sad, but because I finally, fully understood this was never just a real estate story. It was a reclamation story. A homecoming. A revolution in soft tones and firm foundations. So, to anyone reading this, if you've ever been called poor, too soft, too much, or not enough, I want you to know you were never meant to stay in those rooms. You were meant to build your own, and fill them with light, and leave the door open behind you. We are not just here to survive systems. We are here to reimagine them. To buy back the blocks they said we'd never own. To raise daughters who inherit deeds, not debt. To remind our sons that gentleness is a strength. To pass down more than trauma, to pass down tools, Because wealth isn't just what you hold, that it's what you heal, what you teach, what you leave behind that multiplies without you. And if you've ever felt behind, hear me, you're not late, you're right on time. Pick up your blueprint, sharpen your voice, and start building. The door is open, the keys are in your hands, let's go home.